Captivate. Some of you may be thinking, I don't use Captivate. Why should I attend Paul's session? Well, I'm here to tell you that everyone is going to get something out of this session. I've known Paul for a long time. He's been an instructional designer for many years, and he owns his own company where he creates Adobe Captivate videos and acts as a consultant with clients to help them with e-learning projects. If you get a chance, go out and check out his channel. Even if you don't use Adobe Captivate, the cool thing about Paul's work is that you can gain a lot from understanding how he makes things easy. Looking at complex tasks, how to do things. I've just learned so much from just watching his channel and subscribing to it. I just want you to know that he has many viewers. If you go out there and look, he's probably got, I think, up to 2 million views by now, and many thousands of subscribers. So lots of different things. Now today, he's going to show us how to go in and work with interactions in Adobe Captivate. But I think you can take the information that he's going to present and it'll apply to any e-learning tool that you're using, whether it's Storyline or other types of development tools. Because when you think about how do we take those interactions and really make them interesting and work out complex interactions, there's a true science to it. I don't know about you, but there's been many times that I've tried to create something and I'll spend a bunch of time trying to debug it. And if I had just worked smarter in the beginning, I would have solved a lot of problems. So I hope you enjoy Paul's session and get some really good nuggets of information. He's a master person with Adobe Captivate and with interactions. So we're so happy to have you, Paul. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Debbie. Everyone can hear me okay? Make sure we can hear me before I start rambling on there.
We hear you.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, so like what Debbie said, you know, like obviously the tool that I use being the Captivate teacher is Adobe Captivate. But what I want to emphasize, I think the two main takeaways, first of all, for everybody is that if you break everything down into the smallest steps possible, when you're thinking about building any kind of interaction, whether you write JavaScript or whether you use advanced actions like I do in Adobe Captivate, or you know the scripting tools that are built into other authoring tools, if you break it down into the smallest steps, sometimes the most complex interactions can become a lot simpler because you don't need to think about it holistically. Just think small steps. So I'm going to show you a good example of that today. I originally did this presentation back at DevLearn in 2021, and I found that the full thing was too much for 1 hour. So let me just bring up on my screen here. Let me first of all share my screen here. Bear with me a moment, and I'll just share a couple of links for you. And I believe they've been pasted into the chat as well. So the original eLearning Magic presentation is cp.coach/eMagic. Okay, and that will allow you to download the step-by-step. This is really important for Captivate users, less so for maybe other authoring tool users. But the files there, I've got a start file where nothing's been done, a completed file where the advanced action is complete, and of course a complete step-by-step PDF guide showing you exactly how I built this. Today, what I'm going to be going through is using the link cp.coach/atd-houston22. So if you follow that link, you can see the actual project file I'll be using today. But hopefully, even if you're only seeing what I'm showing today, the other homework, so to speak, will be easier to understand once you've seen an example of that. So let me first of all stop the presentation here. And what I've opened up is making eLearning Magic _start. And this is just a title page. There's nothing really going on here. What I wanted to do, and actually I'm going to open up the other one as well. Just bear with me a moment here. I'll show you what the result is so you can see what the complete project looks like here. Let's do this one. And I will just preview this for you so you can see what the result is. In fact, I was inspired by Articulate Rise with this first interaction here. So let me bring this over and we'll go to slide number 2. So one of the things that I really liked using Articulate Rise was the flip cards. There's nothing like that in Adobe Captivate. So I wanted to create something like that. I also wanted to include forced navigation, not because I'm necessarily a believer in forced navigation, but hey, all of our stakeholders ask for this. You know, they'll say, well, I don't want them to move forward until they've seen all the flip cards flipped over. So I hide my next button until they've done that. But this is the cool effect that I was able to come up with here for this. And then of course the next button appears. And if there's time today, we'll also cover this content carousel. What I like about this is it's really easy to build a content carousel, but in Adobe Captivate, you wouldn't normally have your your left arrow disabled on item 1, and then of course toggle through these, and then the right arrow disabled at the end, and again force navigation when you get to the next item there. So again, just thinking about these steps will be the focus of what we're going to do today. The other aspect of this is that when done correctly, if you create these slides, you can save them into a template of your own design and then simply copy and paste them into the project, saving yourself a lot of time. And I'll show you an example of that towards the end of today's session here. So let's start off with, I'm going to close the completed version here, and I'm just going to hit don't save. And we're going to start with the start version, which is all the objects. It has none of the variables and none of the advanced actions added yet. So we'll do that here. And just bear with me while I get my notes on my other screen ready here, because I like to have my notes up front, just like any facilitator would. While I created this stuff, and of course this is included in the link as well. While I created this stuff, it's a very good possibility that when push comes to shove, I might forget a step, and I want to make sure I give you the best demo here possible. So for this slide here, I started thinking about this, and I've actually done several versions of flip cards. This is the most up-to-date version. And what I like about this is that I fixed some of the things that people gave me feedback on. I fixed some of the things that didn't work quite the way people expected. So I ended up discovering that I really need 2 variables per flip card. The flip cards themselves in Adobe Captivate are simply shapes, and they're used as buttons. And what I created in the shape that used as a button, I used a fill for the image, or sorry, an image fill. And the image fill is actually a picture of just a white field with this little flip icon. I wanted to duplicate that as well. So that's always going to appear in the bottom right-hand corner here. So because I've selected this to be used as a button, I have the Actions tab in Adobe Captivate. Adobe Captivate always goes to next slide as the default success action. We're going to change that. We're going to write in advanced action, and then I'll show you how easy it is to duplicate that for flip card number 2 and flip card number 3. So before I do anything else, I need the variables. And the reason for these particular variables is I need to keep track of whether it's flipped or not, and whether it's completed or not, whether it's been pressed at least once. So I'm going to start by clicking on Add New. And I like to start all my variables with an underscore. The reason for that is that all my user variables will be grouped together and easy to find. And I always name my variables after what slide they're going to be used on and what object they're related to. So this is slide 2, underscore, flip card, 01. And I'm going to copy this. I don't need to assign a value because a blank is just 0 in this case, and they'll all start with a 0 value. I'll press save. I'll add another one, and we'll just change the 1 to 2. Press save. And the third one there. I'm going to make another set of 3. So this is going to keep track. If I assign a value of 1, it's considered flip over. When I flip it back, it'll go back to 0. And I'll do that through the advanced action. But I want to keep track of whether I've pressed all 3. So I need 3 more variables for that. And I'm going to use the same structure, except I'm going to just type underscore complete. So I'm going to copy that, save it, add new, paste it in again, and just change that to flip card 2. And then flip card 3. So I have my 6 variables now once I hit save there. And I can now close the variables window. So I need to write my advanced action. So I'm going to click on the project drop-down menu, advanced actions. And in advanced actions in Adobe Captivate, the easiest way I can explain it is that normally you have a single action. So like if I create this back button down here, a single action would be go to previous slide. Or if it was a next button, go to next slide, that sort of thing. You would use advanced actions when you need to perform 2 or more actions. So maybe you need to go to next slide, but you also need to close your table of contents or something like that. So that would require an advanced action to do something like that. You also need it when you first need to check whether a condition has been met. And that's what we're going to do in this case here. So I'm going to create the first advanced action. It's going to be called slide 02 underscore flip card 01. I don't have an underscore in front of it, so I'm not using the same action name as a variable name. That would be a no-no in Captivate. But, you know, it's similar so that I can see, you know, what is what. You haven't seen me do it here, but I've also labeled all these objects the same sort of formatting. So when you're writing advanced actions, make sure you label all of your objects as opposed to Smart Shape 327 or text caption number 42. You know, it's meaningless. So change those out to be names that make sense. Now, to make this a conditional advanced action, I just click this checkbox here. And if you've done any kind of coding or computer programming, you'll recognize if, then, and else are actions. If actions, if this, then the actions are run, and then else. Or the website, you know, IFFF, I think it is. If this, then that. No, I'm doing that wrong. IFTTT or whatever it's called. But here it's just a simple if then. So if this is true, then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and so on. So in this case here, we need to look at that first variable. In this case here, I'll select my slide 2 flip card 01. And I'm going to say if it is equal to, I could choose another variable, but in Captivate, if you want to type in a number, you select literal. And I'm just going to say if it's equal to 0, in other words, we haven't done anything with it yet, we're going to do a bunch of things with it here. So first thing we're going to do, now this is what I'm talking about when I think, if you think about how do I flip an object over and show a different set of information on it. Well, if you look at it that way, it's very difficult to think about that. But if we break it down into basic steps, now in this case here, I need to change the value of my variable to remember that this is now flipped. So I'm going to assign, that's the action, that same variable with a literal value of 1. So if I was to go down to the else section, I could have the same action and then reset it back to 0. So essentially I'm creating a toggle. It would be equal to 1, then it would go back to 0 if I press it again. Then if I press it again, it goes back to 1, and we're keeping track of what the condition of this flip card will be. And we'll get to the else in a bit, but we'll focus on this. Now, in my instructions, I actually assign, and this is something I learned literally the day of learning solutions last week, the slide 2 flip card 1 complete. I was saving that till the end. I like to do that right up front here. So the order is going to be a little bit different, but all the same steps are going to be performed here. So I'm going to do the assign flip card complete with the literal value 1. This seems to work better when you've got someone pressing the buttons really quickly. It wasn't really an issue I discovered when I was just pressing them normally. So now we've taken care of our variables. When we look at these, how do I make this look like it's flipping over? Well, in Captivate, there's an effect. And if you look at my webcam for a sec, hopefully you can see that. There's an effect called collapse across, which looks like you're just taking an object and shrinking it down to be a one-dimensional plane, if you will, in the middle. And that's what we're going to use for the first part of this effect. So, and you can apply effects. Most people think of effects as something that happens on the timeline, but you can do it in advanced actions as well. So we're going to apply effect. And these are my objects here. Now this one happens to be called slide 2 underscore flip card 1, as opposed to something not so meaningful. And I'm going to choose the effects from the options that are available. Now in this case, I'm actually using an exit effect. That's that collapse across. It's actually normally a way to have something disappear or leave the canvas in this case. So I'm going to choose collapse across. And like all effects, there are some parameters that need to be set. So I click the 3-dot button there. 2 seconds is too long for a flip. 4 seconds would be the total duration. So we're going to shorten that up. I like 0.3. It's kind of fast. And I don't find this makes a big difference, but there is an ease effect. It's kind of like braking as you come to a stop sign effect. So you can set that to 100% if you optionally wish to. In other authoring tools, there might be something similar to this collapse across effect. Now, because advanced actions are computer code, computer script, it happens so quickly, we need to actually delay what we're going to do next by that same 0.3 seconds, because if we don't, we won't even see that collapse across effect. So I'm going to choose that. And like any tool that you're using, knowing these actions, exploring and finding out what all these actions do really help with these individual steps. So think of these like micro steps. When I first tried this, I didn't include the delay next actions by, in this case, 0.3 seconds. So I wasn't seeing what I was expecting. I wasn't seeing it, but then it occurred to me, everything's happening so fast. So a little bit of trial and error, but again, think of these steps as individual tiny steps. Now, this is a multi-state object. In Captivate, you can have different states. Back in the old days of Captivate, we would hide an object and show another one to make it appear as if something's turning into something else. Nowadays, of course, they can set up a single object to have many different appearances or states, if you will. So after our 3.3 second delay, we're going to change the state of our slide 2, flip card 01, from its normal state, which is operational excellence, over to flipped. And that's going to work well in this case here. And now that it's flipped over, remember, it's still kind of collapsed in on itself. So now we want to bring it around as if the second part of the flip is occurring. So we're going to apply effects. And again, the same object as before. And we're going to now use an entrance effect because we're coming back into the slide, if you will. And this is the opposite of collapse across, which is stretch across. Same thing as before, we need to set the parameters for it. Again, 2 seconds is too long, so 0.3, and we can use that same ease in effect. So that's okay, we can click OK now. And the other thing that we want to do is kind of the opposite of this stuff. So the cool thing about Captivate Advanced Actions is that you can replicate a lot of your work simply by copying and pasting it. So I'm going to copy all of these lines of this advanced action script. If I select the first one and hold down my shift key and select the last one, I can select them all. And using this little icon here, I can copy it and go down to else and paste it. So let's go back up here for a second. If the variable associated with flip card 1 is equal to 0, we're going to do all this stuff. Else, in other words, if it's valued at anything else than 0, we're going to do this stuff. So what we need to do is change this back to 0 because we're doing the opposite of the steps above. We can ignore the assign complete variable with 1. Doesn't matter whether it's 1, it'll already be 1 at this point. You could actually delete this line if you wish. So we could delete that, or you could just ignore it. It's not hurting our advanced action. We're still doing the same flip around. We're delaying the action. And this case here, we're going to be changing it back to normal. So we're creating a toggle. We'll be flip it over again, and that should work fine. Now, if I save this as an action, let's do that at this point here. And I'm going to close this, and we'll just assign the first shape used as a button to execute that advanced action. You can see that in my properties panel here. And I only have one advanced action written, so we should be able to test this out. So before I go too far down the rabbit hole, I like to test it and make sure at least just that flip effect works as expected here. So we'll just do a preview in HTML5 in browser. Okay, we'll just do this. And that works entirely as expected there. So let's go back into this advanced action. I can go here, or you can access it from here. But let's do it from up here. Select it there. And there are multiple tabs. So there's something else I need to do here with this advanced action. Every time I click on one of these flip cards, I want to check to see if this whole interaction is complete. In other words, has the learner pressed all 3? And if so, we're going to show the next button. So how we do that is we add another tab. Now, it's a good best practice to label your tabs. So I'm going to call this first one press. That's what happens when we press the flip card. And then the next one, I'm going to call it check, because we're going to be checking to see if we're done. Now, this is also a conditional advanced action. So I selected the conditional checkbox there. And we're just going to see if we're done. And how we do that is we check the value of our 3 complete variables. So if flip card 01 is equal to literally 1 and flip card 02 complete is equal to literally 1, and scroll down a little bit here, flip card 03 complete, these are the variables, not the objects, is equal to the literal value 1. In other words, we've pressed all 3 of those flip cards. So that's a good sign that we've completed this. And we're going to show this next button. And again, I've labeled it. I've thought ahead of time that, this is just a smart shape used as a button. It would be called something like Smart Shape 324, which means nothing to me. So I changed that label to S2 underscore next. So I'm going to show, and again, knowing your actions, just, through experience, you'll get to recognize, which actions are available for different things. And we're going to type, or select rather, slide 2 next. And I can now update this action and click OK. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's great. You've just spent the last 15 minutes or so writing one action or one advanced action for a flip card here. What's cool about Adobe Captivate is I've got this little button right up here called Duplicate Action. If I press that, it makes an exact copy of that entire advanced action. And all I need to do is edit the action name. So we're going to make this for flip card 2. I'm going to delete this duplicate of business at the front here. And we're just going to change which variables and objects we're working with. So this was for flip card 1. So now I'm going to work with the variable for flip card 2. Same thing here. In fact, I can cheat and just type in flip card 02 to get a shorter list of what I'm working with here. Flip card 02. And we're working with the object of flip card, in this case now, flip card 02. We don't need to change anything there. That's going to retain itself from before. We're going to change the state of flip card 02 to flipped. And we're going to be working with flip card 02 again for the final flip around or stretch across effect here. I just need to go down to else, do the same thing here. And the object, we're going to flip it around, change it back to normal. And then, of course, flip it around again or choose the stretch across effect. There's nothing I need to change on the second tab because this doesn't change regardless of which button you're pressing or which flip card you're pressing. So I just need to make those changes to the first one and I can update the action. And now I have the advanced action for 2 flip cards. Let's duplicate it once more. We'll change this to 3 and again, get rid of the stuff at the beginning of that action name. And we'll change all these to the variables and the objects for flip card 03. So here we go. The variable for flip card 03, the complete variable for flip card 03. This is how we know this is done. And the actual flip card itself. And the actual flip card itself over to flipped in this case. Flip card 03, stretch across, and then of course the toggle portion. Flip card 03. I always have to watch myself when I'm doing this sort of repetitive, like I'm just making the same changes to a bunch of objects. It's so easy if you're not really, it's like when you're driving in your car to work and suddenly you're 10 minutes away from work and you're not sure how you got there. It's kind of like that. It's not quite as dangerous as that, but you definitely want to kind of pay attention to what you're doing. This goes back to normal and then flip card 03. Anyone who's viewed my YouTube channels before, all of this gets done in a short little 4 or 5 minute video. But the scary part is that this is live. So let's hope this works. Let's hope I didn't make a mistake there. So now you can see here, I've got all 3 advanced actions that make this work. So let's make sure we're executing our advanced actions for here, execute advanced actions, and this will be flip card number 2. And this one will be flip card number 3. And I'm just going to double check that I set the visibility of the next button to be not visible in output, and it is. So that's good. And if I've done this correctly, let's hope I have. Let's preview this and hopefully it'll work just like the one I showed you a little while ago. Obviously, I would hide my play bar for the whole forced navigation thing to actually work here. But let's see if we got this working. First one, second one. Oh, nice. Got it on the first try. So I use these. These are great. Like when it's click to reveal, obviously 2 or 3 or maybe 4 you could fit on a slide if they're a bit smaller. And what I end up doing is I create templates of these sorts of interactions. And the beauty of Captivate is once you've built these advanced actions and all these variables, you literally can copy this slide, create a new project. Let's create a new blank project here. Let me just choose the same screen resolution that I'm using for this project. And if I paste that in, it will paste the slide in, just like you saw it before, copying all the object styles and all the graphics that I've used, including the graphics in the background of these. But what's really nice, let me delete this opening slide here. What's really nice is that it copied the variables over. Now, if I paste it a second time, you'll see uniquely named versions of all these variables. It'll probably just add a number at the end of those. But in addition, it will also duplicate all of those advanced actions. It might give them new names. And you'll also see that sometimes the object names will get truncated or what's the right word I'm looking for? They'll add a little extension at the end of the object names. Don't worry about that. Even though it's renamed it in the advanced action, it's also renamed the object as well. So this will completely work. So once you've built an advanced action or advanced interaction like this, you can copy it from one project over to another and very quickly add these to your project. So I have files that contain 2 flip cards, 3 flip cards, 4 flip cards. Probably 5 or 6 would be about the most you'd want to do. And it's at that point that I usually move on to this sort of interaction, which is the this little content carousel. And the idea here, this only uses one variable because I want to keep track of what position I'm on within that content carousel. But there are 3 advanced actions. The first one is when we first arrive on the slide, so we can set it up to look a certain way. And the other 2 advanced actions are for the left and the right arrow. In case I run out of time, I'm going to try and do this one quickly. Actually, no, I think I should be good. So what I'll do is I'll start on this interaction. If I run out of time, It's okay. You've got the steps for doing this. And of course, it should give you a sense of what again, my key takeaway, regardless of what tool you're using, if you break this down into the littlest, tiniest of steps that you need, it makes it a lot easier to figure out. So here's another example of that. When I arrive on the content carousel slide, I need to set the slide up. I need to do a few things and have it appear a certain way. So we'll do that. We're going to do an on enter advanced action. So the slide itself has actions associated with it, just like shapes used as buttons or images used as buttons. So we're going to run that from this on enter action. First thing I need, though, is that variable. So I'm going to go to the project drop-down menu and select variables. And I think in my instructions here, I called it slide 3, S3. S03 underscore carousel. So let's do that. Underscore S03 underscore carousel. Now, in this case, you can assign it an initial value of 1 if you wish, or you can do that from the on enter action. I'm going to leave it 0 or blank for right now, and I'll do it through my on enter advanced action. So let's go ahead and close this. Let me explain what's here on the screen. So I've got the left arrow, which is just an image of a chevron pointing to the left, and it's a multi-state object. So it has an additional state that I custom added where it looks grayed out. I really just set the transparency to like 50% or something like that. The right arrow has the same. There is a rollover and a down state with buttons in Captivate. I actually deleted those. I find they interfere with the way this looks when people roll over and press or click on these buttons. So I only have my disabled custom state that I did myself and the normal state. This content object is actually just a rounded rectangle shape. And within the multi-states, I added pictures that correspond to what I'm talking about on each of these states. In this example, there's 4, and I've also added a text caption in each one just to explain, what we're talking about here. And this object is called S3 underscore carousel. And then there's my right arrow, S3 underscore right. And of course, just like on the second slide, there's S3 underscore next. And its action, of course, is simply to go to the next slide. And in Captivate, if you wanted to get rid of that play bar that you saw before, I can just uncheck that from the skin editor window. That's in the project drop-down menu. And that way we won't see that moving forward. So let's do our on enter advanced action. We've already created our slide 3 carousel variable. So we'll go to project, advanced actions, and I'll show you the process here. And you'll see me move my advanced action window around on the screen. It's a visual cue for me to think about as I'm looking at the slide, what do I need to change here? So I'm going to call this one slide 03 underscore enter. And the first thing I want to do is disable this left button, both in appearance, but in actual functionality as well. So we've seen this action before. We're going to change the state. And if you've labeled it properly, you can type in the word left. And then, of course, that object comes up. So I'm going to change it instead of normal, how it looks right now, to that disabled. Again, I just made it somewhat transparent, so it looks grayed out. Now, if you want to actually disable the left arrow, take a guess at what you think the action would be to disable a button in Captivate. Any takers on that? I'm sure you'll come to the right conclusion here. We're going to disable it. And again, I could just type in left. Okay, so I've taken care of the left arrow. We need to assign that variable a value of 1 because we're on the first item of our carousel. So let's assign carousel. I might have done this first. And you'll sometimes discover that when something is instantaneous, like everything that's going to happen on enter here, it almost doesn't matter what order you put them in. But if you decide you would like to take care of this first, I'll show you in a second how we can move that to the first position there. So I'm going to set this to be the literal value of 1. So we're keeping track of what position in the carousel we're on. If you've decided that you think this should go first, again, it won't matter in this example, but I can use these arrows to move any line of text in advanced action or any line of script up to a different position or down if necessary. I need to change this in case it's already been selected and we moved on and came back to the slide. We want to change it back to the first position. You generally don't have to do this in Captivate, but if for some reason you've decided to retain the state, that's an option with multi-state objects. So again, I think I called it S3 carousel. I'm right. And we're going to go back to normal. You can't relabel the normal state of an object, so you just have to remember that step 1 is the normal state. And as you can see, I'm just kind of reminding myself the right arrow. If I disabled it when I left the slide, maybe on a revisit, I want to make sure it goes back to enabled. So we're going to, first of all, change the state of our right button to normal, in other words, available. And we're actually going to enable it in case it was disabled when we left the slide the first time. So that's it. That's what we need to do on enter. So I'm going to save that as an action, click OK, and we can click close, and then go over here to our on enter and select advanced actions, execute advanced actions. And you should find it in your list of advanced action scripts that you've written. So there it is there. So now I need to write, and I do this differently than some people. Maybe people think left to right here. I always write the script for my right arrow first. I don't know why, because it's probably just because it's the most likely button that someone's going to press. So we're going to write the script for that. And we're going to actually kind of reuse some of what's in here, at least the structure. So let's go to Project, Advanced Actions, and we will call this slide 03 underscore right. That's sufficient enough here. And we're going to do kind of multiple tabs like we did before. So the first one, we'll call this press. So when you press this, and again, think about this. So we have a variable that's keeping track of the position of our content carousel. So when we press the right button, we want to add something to that variable. If it's currently 1, we're going to make it 2. If it's currently 2, we're going to make it 3. So there's an action for that. So you know how we assigned a value to those variables before? You can actually increment variables. So simply add 1 to them. So I'm going to increment slide 3 carousel by a value of 1. That's the only thing I want to do on this tab. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to go to Untitled 2 here. And we're going to do a condition. We're going to check for a condition. So if, remember our slide 3 carousel variable here, if that, and we just got to find it there, is equal to the literal value of 1. Now, you might be thinking, if I'm pressing the right arrow, it's never going to be 1. There's going to be some redundancy that I'm doing here to save us some time later. So don't worry too much about that. But I think this logic works well. So if our content carousel is equal to 1, we want to do the same sorts of things that we saw in that on enter advanced action. So we want to disable our left arrow, right? Because if you're on 1, you can't go any lower than 1. Well, you can, but in this case, we don't want to. And we're going to change its appearance. So it's the left arrow to disabled. This object here, we're going to change the state of our slide 3 underscore carousel to the first step, which is normal. And again, in case we don't know what the previous state of our right arrow is, we're going to enable it as well and change its appearance back to normal. And that's pretty much it. That's going to take care of this. Now, this is going to be if equals 1 or something that makes it clear that that's what's happening on this tab. Like this duplicate advanced action button that's way up here, we have a duplicate tab. So let's do the same thing for if our carousel is on 2. So we're going to change, if slide 3 carousel is equal to 2, we're going to do a few things differently. If we're on the second position, we're going to actually enable our left button. We're going to change its state to normal. In other words, it'll be clickable at that point. And we'll change the state of our carousel object itself to step number 2. And this is the same. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate number 2 till we get 3. Okay, if equals 3, change this to 3. And change everything stays the same except the carousel will need to change to step number 3. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this once more. Now, in actual fact, like I mentioned before, with my flip cards, the most I would probably do is 4, 5, maybe 6 if they were small flip cards, just because of the restrictions of our slides. But a content carousel, why I like using those is when I go beyond 5, 6, and they get into 7 object, 8 object, 9, 10. At 10, you might want to split it across different slides, but if you've got that much content that you want to chunk out into these, of course, this works quite well for that type of interaction. But in this example, we've got 4 different items in our content carousel. So let's make the changes for number 4 now. So we're going to check to see if carousel is equal to the literal value 4. Left is enabled. We're going to change its appearance to normal. The carousel will need to be step number 4. But again, we're at the end of the carousel. So we actually want to now disable the right. And sometimes Captivate can be a little funky when you're selecting things there. And we're going to change its state to disabled. And the last thing we're going to do, because we're on the 4th tab now or item within the carousel, we're now ready. We can show the next button because they visited all the states of our carousel. And this is slide 3. And there it is there. So we can save this as an action, click OK. And again, like before, you might be thinking, Paul's going to run out of time here. It took him 15 minutes to write these 2 scripts. This is the coolest part about this interaction. I can duplicate the whole thing. Okay, so that's all these tabs plus the press tab. And this was for the right button. Let's change this to left button. And we'll get rid of this junk at the front here, duplicate of business. I'm just going to change this. All of these are still fine for the left button. The only thing that changes is we're going to decrement our carousel variable by a value of 1. So update that action. Now I've got the left and the right button done. Click OK. Click close. And now we just need to make sure we're assigning these to the appropriate buttons here. So execute advanced actions. And that will be slide 3 right. And similarly here, execute advanced actions, slide 3 left. Okay, let's test the whole thing out now, see if I made any mistakes. Okay, so we know this one works. Great. All right, so we've arrived on content carousel. Left arrow is disabled. Forward is forward. Perfect. And of course, I could go back if I want. So that's what I got for you today. And again, like before, I could copy this slide, paste it into other projects. That's the key step. You can't duplicate it within Captivate, but you can certainly copy from a template project and build yourself very quickly all the advanced interactions that you might need in a project. And of course, you guys have instructions now on not only how to build these two, but a multiple choice single answer, a multiple choice multiple answer, some kind of rotating little interaction I came up with that's a little bit clever. And if you find yourself in a situation where you have to develop something in Captivate, I think you got the tools to look like a superstar when you put this stuff together. So I'll hand it back over to Debbie. I don't know if you want to take any questions. If there are any, I certainly can do that. If there's any questions or last minute comments or anything like that.
Oh, can we throw you into a breakout room with our participants if they want to ask you questions?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Thank you so much, Paul. I hope everybody got something out of his presentation. And I always, like I said, I always get nuggets of really good information from Paul. So thank you so much. All right. So Stephanie, let's move everybody into a breakout room and we're going to get ready for the last group of presenters.
Absolutely.